Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars aim to provide advice and share knowledge on key business topics and specialist areas. Joining me today is BizSmart Select member Gill Hutchinson from Aardvarck Marketing Consultants, and in today's webinar, Gill will discuss word-of-mouth marketing. Before we start the webinar, can I ask you to use the question mark function on your screen to post any questions that you may have for Gill, and she will answer them at the end of the session. Many thanks, and over to you, Gill.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Gill from Aardvarck Marketing, and we're going to have a look today at what is definitely the most powerful and effective form of marketing when you can get it to work properly. Most businesses find that word-of-mouth referrals are absolutely fantastic for their business, but the challenge is to think about how we can influence that and how we can make it work better for us. So we're going to think about how, why and when we recommend others ourselves, and think about the process that people go through when they recommend us, and then I'll review some actions we can take to manage referral business better. So I don't know if you're the same generation as me, but my mother always taught me that money doesn't grow on trees. And in fact, that's kind of wrong in a business context, because money does certainly grow on a tree if it's a referral tree. So what we need to do is get people who are more than happy to recommend us to others and who will do so on a regular basis, and then you find your business will grow. So I'm hoping some of the ideas today can dramatically increase the number of referrals you get to your business. And I'm going to ask you to bear with me a little bit, because there's lots of ideas you can implement to do this, but I'm going to leave that towards the end of the webinar, and I'm going to start with some basics about how and why referrals work. Thinking about the process is important to understand some of the things we need to think about to plan it into our own business a little bit better. So if you've got a pen and paper handy, or use the question mark for any questions that occur to you through the webinar, I'll try and get back to those at the end. So let's have a look at referrals and who actually influences us, who has a bearing on our ideas, beliefs and behaviours. Well, we're going to start with our families. You never get away from your closer relatives. And even if you haven't got close family nearby and to someone to ask, we still cling to the values that are instilled in us by our parents and our grandparents. So we might find ourselves in situations thinking, well, what would my mum tell me to do? Even if I don't actually ask her, I kind of know what she would tell me to do. So that's the first sphere of influence. Secondly, we turn to our friends and our work colleagues, who can also be powerful influences on our decision making. And what's great about some modern inventions, the social media networks we have now, is that it's so much easier to stay in touch with past friends and colleagues. We're not limited to the ones we sit down with every day and actually work with directly. We can stay in touch with a lot of people for longer through these wonderful social networks. So, friends and family, colleagues. The next sphere of influence is our professional advisors. So I'm sure a lot of you will have turned to your BizSmart coach. Perhaps even when your coaching is finished, you'll still stay in touch with them, you'll still ask them for their advice. We quite often refer as business people to our accountants, another trusted advisor, perhaps our bank manager or our solicitor. It might even occasionally be someone like me who advises on marketing. So if you're really desperate, you'll get to us. And for some of our clients, and certainly people who work as professional advisors, once we're in that sort of inner circle with the business and we're trusted as advisors, we become their go-to expert for all sorts of weird and wonderful things. So we can be asked about IT, and we're expected to know all about that. I've been asked about employment contracts from my clients, and we've even acted as a relationship expert in a family business. And that was a very strange situation to get into, but it was essentially because, sorry, it's my teacup, I just caught with my watch. Because it was a family business, they had parents in the business, they had two sons and their wives in the business, and they all grouped together to do some marketing activity. Even though they were run as separate businesses, they were branded and grouped together. So even if you could get the managers to agree in a business meeting about strategy, they would then go home and the wives would start having a go at the husbands for agreeing to such things and saying why they were unhappy with it. So So you get into all sorts of relationships as a trusted advisor. You get asked about all sorts of things, not just your area of expertise. And something else to consider, we spend a lot of time as business people spending time on making our website look fantastic and adding content to that. We invest time and money in SEO to get our website found. We invest a lot of time, some of it, in social media. But I want you just to think for a moment that that might not be the first port of call for somebody if they're asking for help. It could be their second choice. So would you Google something and ask for advice from Google, or would you go to a trusted advisor, someone you know? So we might be missing out if we're not thinking about who those people are in our circle of influencers. Who might people be asking for advice? It might not just be that they go straight to Google. Fourth circle, and this is the most nebulous, is anybody else, complete strangers that we don't know, but we do, surprisingly, take note of these people. So you might say that would never happen to me, but you might have looked at reviews on TripAdvisor to see who's got 5-star ratings. You might have looked at some product reviews on Amazon. And it's a kind of a sheep-like reaction we have. We like to group together. We like to be part of a herd. It's the kind of mentality of, well, it might be a poor choice, but I'm not the only person who's making that poor choice. I'm going to be influenced by other people, even if I don't know them, which is quite bizarre when you think about it. So much for the who of recommendations. So think about who is actually recommending you. It might not just be the social media, the website, the Googling route that we need to look at. Then we need to think about, why do we trust a recommendation? And I'm sure everybody will have heard this, that people buy from people and not from companies. And that is true. So a lot of it is about building really strong personal relationships with people that can help us. We'll often put our trust in other consumers rather than a brand or a business owner. That's certainly true. And what we're doing is we're actually reducing the risk of that decision by asking other people's opinions. People who've been there and got the t-shirt. In BizSmart, we always say, as advisors, we also run our own businesses, so we actually know what it's like to be in that sort of situation, and we can empathize with that. And if there's a strong personal connection, if our sphere of influence, the person we ask is strongly connected to us, knows us, we'd expect them to filter that information a bit and give us information that was really valuable. They might consider other things but not recommend them because they don't think it's right for us. So occasionally a personal connection can be rejected simply because we don't think they've got experience of that, so we turn instead to professional. Something to bear in mind. Who do you turn to help, and why? And who somebody would turn to for a recommendation for your business? And then the other thing that really influences when we are happy to recommend somebody is something really special. If something is outstanding enough, we will recommend them spontaneously. We will talk about these things without being prompted. So that's great when it happens, but it doesn't always happen. But if we're prompted and we're asked for an opinion, we usually will be happy to help. People want to help. They want to give you a recommendation if they can. So thinking a little bit about what goes through your own mind, if somebody asks you for a recommendation, what is it that made, if you've done that in the past, what was it that made it special? What was that product or service? How was it different? Why did it stand out from the others? So in my case, as a professional advisor, I'm always willing and happy to recommend somebody if they have specialist knowledge of something that I don't have, because what it does is it benefits my customer, and I also benefit from giving them a good referral. I can make them do better by giving them access to a specialist, or I'm quite happy to admit if I don't know something very well. But that usually is beneficial for me as well as a referrer. But there are also risks. Sometimes we can make a recommendation and the fit isn't right, and it might not be that their product or service is wrong. It could be that it was right, but there wasn't a personal empathy, there wasn't a great fit between the two people you connected. So sometimes that makes us a little bit wary about recommending, and we have to think about how that's going to work in our business. What are the factors that might make people a little bit wary, and how are we helping to get over that? And occasionally this specialness can be as a result of something going completely wrong. If we have an issue or a complaint with a service and that business deals with it very well. They're very open and honest and professional about it. Sometimes we can turn somebody who hates your business into an absolute raving fan just by getting that process right. We're all human. We all do make mistakes. Sometimes our computer systems make mistakes and we miss things. But how we deal with that mistake makes a huge difference in how we're perceived. So let's have a look at some of the rights and wrongs, some of the truths and some of the myths behind recommendations. I'd just like to get this straight before we go on. What are the real facts and figures behind what we're doing? Why should we be considering this as part of our marketing activity? So the first thing we need to consider is where the source of information is coming from. Do we trust a particular source of information? And as consumers, we are bombarded with thousands and thousands of adverts, from first time in the morning when we switch our radio on till last thing at night. We get them everywhere. We get them at work, we get them on our phones, we get them in the car when we listen to a radio, we get them from friends. Adverts are coming at us left, right and centre. And increasingly we're wary of adverts and we don't believe them. We think they're great entertainment, we love watching them, but sometimes we have to just accept that anything you produce as your company is going to be labelled as an advert, and they will reject the message for that reason. So an advert will include your website, it will include things you do online with your social media, as well as a traditional printed newspaper advert or so on. That's not to say it can't work really well. There is a solicitor in my networking circle who gets fantastic reviews on Gill, and he's the only solicitor that seems to bother with Gill, and he gets a lot of business from it, which is fantastic. He doesn't need to do anything else, and that's all done digitally. So think about where the source of information is coming from. Secondly, we need to know there are some great influencers out there. So 10% of the population have the greatest influence over the other 90%. So are you a leader or are you a follower? And again, celebrity endorsements or people who are well known locally endorsements can be absolutely fantastic, but we have to be a little bit careful because brands can go toxic. They can have some damage done to them. So if you think, I don't know if you're a golfer, you probably know Tiger Woods, whether you're a golfer or not, but in 2009 he went through a very nasty divorce after a car accident in which he was caught out having an affair basically, and that sort of damaged his brand. So whereas companies are wanting to be associated with him before that incident, afterwards they have to think twice about it. More recently, we've seen the growth of vloggers, so usually young people, but not just young people, who make videos of themselves and post them out on social media. And some vloggers are immensely influential. If you have a teenage daughter, 24% of teenage girls will view and take note of a lady called Zoella as a role model. Now, we might not like the fact that they're doing that, but that's certainly the case. And these well-known bloggers will get payments to recommend a product or to use a product by companies. So there are out there some fantastic influencers, and it would be helpful to know who they are for your industry. Third point I'd like to make about any message is that it has a strong emotional connection. This guy's obviously really upset about something, and if it's immediate and emotional, that's going to really resonate with them. So let's think about our messaging. Is it an emotional connection, or is it a rational, data-driven sort of message? Because the emotional ones work much better. We identify with them so much more easily. And we also like them if they're independent from the marketer. So coming back to this idea, is it an advert, or is it something you produced, or is it something that somebody else has produced? If it's from a marketer, we're not so keen. We think we're being sold to. Fourthly, do we have an online or an offline conversation? So an online will be through social media, we might pick up the phone later. An offline conversation will be when you actually meet somebody face to face and talk face to face. And sadly, 90% of our consumer conversations around brands are still held offline. So you might meet somebody online, you might get to know them a little, but pound for pound, those online messages count a lot less than a face-to-face recommendation. So I'm not saying don't take any effort with your social media, but you have to recognise it's just part of a bigger picture, and what people are talking about isn't necessarily done online. It might not be visible to you. If you're a large business, you'll use social media because you can't contact your customers directly. So if you're Kellogg's and you're selling cornflakes, that will be sold through a retailer or a distributor of some sort, and you don't know who your customers are. So it's a great way for them to get in contact with individuals. But as a small company, we can be much more agile. We know who our customers are. We can get much closer to them. We can find out a lot more about them. And that's the real advantage. We can be much more nimble with our marketing than these bigger businesses can be. So we need to put people, individuals, rather than technology, at the heart of our marketing strategy. We have to recognise that people have a far greater impact on each other than we perhaps previously realised. And as consumers, we have to recognise we're not marketing to a collection of individuals. They are individuals. So let's have a look at some guidelines. What's best practice with your word-of-mouth marketing? Of course, you can read this for yourself, so I don't want to just read it off there, but it's very important to be honest. So there is the advertising standards talk about being legal, decent, honest and truthful. So if you don't tell people who you are or who the message has come from, if you're not honest about whether you're being paid for something or encouraged to promote something, if you don't disclose that relationship, that's when people will start to question what you're doing and say it looks as though they're being sold to rather than having a genuine recommendation. So those are our guidelines, those are the things we need to think about, and those are the people we know have influence. So before we dive into that, I expect most of you have a thought through your heads thinking, well, I've asked what my customers think of me and they all say they're willing to recommend us. Sometimes it happens, that's great. Sometimes it doesn't. So why would it not happen? I'm going to look at something we call the Net Referrers Index, and this is an influence of both positive and negative opinions on your business. So bear with me, this is a bit complex. Essentially what we've got are a spectrum of people. So they're customers, some of them will really love what you do and they will talk about it incessantly, and they're what we call promoters or brand advocates. They have a very, very positive opinion about you. Some people will buy what you do and they think it's great and they'll use it, but they won't necessarily talk about it. These are the neutral people. And then at the other end of the emotional scale, we get people who have perhaps bought from you or bought your product and really not liked it for some reason, or the service wasn't right, or it didn't arrive on time. Something has really got their goat, and they are negative. They will be what we call saboteurs, brand detractors. So people out there are going to do you a lot of harm if you can't manage them. So to find out how good your reputation really is in the marketplace, you need to listen to all your customers, not just the ones you have great relationships with. So if you were listening last week, Kevin was talking about going and have a coffee with some of your best customers, and that's a really invaluable exercise to do. But sometimes we need to talk to the people who aren't raving fans as well, because they also have strong emotions, things that went wrong, and we can learn an awful lot from that. So have you got any saboteurs in your mix? Because if you have, you need to talk to them. We need to sort it out if we can, because they will undo all the good work of your positive promoters if we're not careful. There's only one way you can find out, which is to do a survey with as large a sample as you can muster. And then the actual calculation is to take that question of would you recommend us, and most people have a scale of 1 to 5. So the 5s are the real positive promoters, so we want to count those. We take out the 4s, we take out the people who are happy to recommend us but aren't really strongly promoting your business. And because the reality is they are very unlikely to do it, even if they're prompted. They are very unlikely to actually take action. So we take out the 4s, and from the 5s we take the 3s, 2s and 1s, and that gives you a score. So we're taking out the lukewarm supporters, the ones that are supporters but aren't actually going to act on that. What we want is the brand advocates, the people who think you're the best thing since sliced bread. They're the ones we're really interested in. Now this slide is a little bit small and I apologise for that, but I wanted to make a couple of points on this. These are sample figures for some surveys that we've done for customers, and just having a little look at the top there, you've got your 5-to-1 score for this question, would you be willing to recommend us? And right at the top, there's probably not a surprise, we've got an optician. And they're a trusted professional health advisor. They really know what they're doing. They're extremely on the ball and manage their customers really well, have fantastic customer service and a great relationship. So you'd expect them to have a high net promoter score, and indeed they have, it's 80%. But if you look underneath that, you'll see somebody you might not have expected to see there, which is a builder. And we all love to moan about builders and how they don't turn up on time or don't say that what they're going to do is actually what's done, and they're always finding more problems and the budget goes out the window. But there is a builder, family firm, with an 81% net promoter index, which just shows that it can be done if you think about it carefully. In the middle of that table, you'll notice a couple of IT companies. One of them has a 16% net promoter score, and one of them has a 78 net promoter score. So not all IT companies are the same. If you look at the individual figures, you can see the second one has an awful lot of 5s in there, the people who really love their service. Whereas the top one with the 16% rating has people that are 3s and 4s. So people are okay, the customers are quite happy, but they're not real advocates. So there is a difference. So are you asking the right questions in your surveys to find out the real difference between these people? And if you look at the bottom again, you can see there's some medical IT companies there, one of which the private practice actually has a negative net promoter score. But they've got a really difficult job because this company sells to complicated consultant teams with many doctors in the team and admin people and finance people all trying to work with the same software. They all have to be trained in how to use it to its full potential. It's really difficult to get all of those people in all of those different roles to be really good brand advocates. It's not to say it can't be done, but they've got to work really hard. So how many brand advocates have you really got? Do you know the answer to that? If you don't, have a look at what you can do to improve that score, because until you improve that score, referral business isn't going to really work for you. So it's really about listening to those customers, the ones who don't like you as much as the ones that do. What is it that makes a difference? So here we are. There are other challenges with word of mouth marketing. I'm just going to raise these with you. There are ways to get around this, but I just want you to think about this. The message that we get from our referrers, our good referrers, is great. It'll be in the customer's own language. It'll be in language that you wouldn't necessarily use. But they might say the wrong thing and they might create the wrong expectation. They might miss some key points. So the message isn't actually under our direct control. And then we look at the timing, and again, this is something that's completely out of your control. It's at the convenience of the person being asked for a referral. And what's really frustrating, many businesses we talk to have this problem when it happens too late. So if you think about a business that sells hundreds of products, and what comes to mind is somebody who does printing and promotional products who we've worked with in the past. And so often in their customer surveys they get, oh, if only I'd known you made such and such, I wouldn't have gone somewhere else. So they had a real problem with that message of getting the great variety of what they did. They did lose sales from it, and we did have to address that. And we worked on that, so to reduce that. You can't stop it happening, but you can reduce it. Thirdly, the audience. You don't know who these people are going to meet or who they're talking to. You don't know if they're actually finding people that are on profile, that are right sort of customer for you. They might be the wrong customer, in which case it's very nice of them to recommend you, but it actually isn't going to work. Sometimes the audience will just forget, or the message was great, but they forget about it, or time passes and they've forgotten who you are, which is unfortunate. Sometimes you get great goodwill in that way, but no action happens, or perhaps they don't have your details, so they can't find you. And again, that's unfortunate, and we need to think about how we can get that under control. So to summarize, referral marketing, word of mouth marketing is absolutely fantastic. But some things are just out of our control. It could happen today, it might happen tomorrow, it could be next month, it could never happen. And those are the sort of things that make it a little bit difficult and challenging. So, how can we take control? And I'm very aware I'm going to run on a little bit of time here. So these are the 4 things that we can manage. We can monitor what's going on, we can be encouraging for our referrers, we can try and educate them to give us better referrals, and we can intervene if things are going wrong. And here's my list. I promised you that come to the things to do right at the end. I'll try not to hurry through this too much. It might go a little bit, Caroline, is that kind of okay?
Of course, carry on.
So, first things first, you can set up something called a Google alert, and if you want to do that and you're not sure how to do it, please contact me and I'll talk you through the steps. So if somebody talks about you on social media, it will come up as an email notification so you know that it's out there and you can do something about it. Second thing is to think about doing a formal recommendation scheme. You can assist people to recommend, and you can encourage them by rewarding them. So you're rewarding the recommender, and you might want to reward a new customer for coming that route as well. And that's a lovely thank you, but actually thinking how to do this is important. We had one customer in Herefordshire who sold beds and mattresses, and they had competed with big national chains with huge advertising budgets, but they competed really successfully because they did a proper recommendation scheme where the customers that recommended them would get a thank you. They would get a pillow. And it got to the stage where a few of these people who were real brand advocates said, I don't really want to recommend you anymore. I will recommend you, but please don't send me any more pillows because my house is already full of them and I really just genuinely don't need any more. So it wasn't about finding huge numbers of people, but they found those brand advocates and they really rewarded them in a nice way. Not a bribe, but enough thank you to make them repeat the experience. And they grew their business very successfully that way. Third is a survey, either an independent survey or you might want to try one yourself. I would recommend you don't use the free Survey Monkey. It looks as though you've done it yourself and people pick up on that. So working out for yourself what your net referrer index is, how likely are you to get recommended, and benchmark that over time. Are you improving? Are you slipping? So track that as a KPI, something you should monitor over time. And similar to that is something we call a consumer advisory panel, which sounds very posh, but actually it's just getting people to use your product or service and ask them how they can improve it. You might have heard of a focus group. It's a bit like a focus group, but actually giving them something to work at. And sometimes doing those things, asking somebody to fill in a survey or putting them on a panel and asking them for their opinion, can turn a very fickle customer into somebody who's extremely loyal to you and very willing to recommend you. Just involving them in the decision making makes them feel really valued and special. They love that. Next thing is customer reviews. Do you collect them somewhere? You might collect them on your website, you might get them offline, and do you publish or share them? And again, it's something that's quite basic housekeeping, but keeping them in one place and publishing them is important. It does work. Again, the same thing for testimonials. Do you have them? Do you keep them? Do you ask for them? So one of the things you can do to manage your marketing better is to actively ask for testimonials and help people write them. So if you need a testimonial for a new product or service, you can actually help them draft it, check that it's okay by them, and then publish it. So you can actually help them to help you. They're usually very willing, but they might need a little bit of prompting and some help, make it easy for them. And then finally, we get the social media recommendations. LinkedIn recommendations, again, have to be individually written, so they're great. But if people aren't on LinkedIn, still get a recommendation from them because you can use it in other places. Facebook likes are very popular. A lot of businesses track Facebook likes. But just a little bit of word of warning. If you watch teenagers with their Facebook likes, they will have a look at a page because a friend or their network are looking at it. They will probably like it because their friends do, but they will never visit that web page again. So just be a little bit wary. It's an indicator, but it might not be the be-all and end-all how many Facebook likes you have. Remember, it's those brand advocates we're looking for, not necessarily popularity stakes. So I hope that helped. There are lots of things you can do to increase your word of mouth recommendations, but it's all about planning and measuring and monitoring and reviewing what's working. Do more of what's working, do less of what's not working, or have a think about why isn't it working. Is it who I'm talking to? Is it the message? Is it the timing? Is it what we're asking them to do? Are they real advocates or are they just so-so advocates? So there are things you can do to improve your word of mouth marketing, and I hope some of those will help you today. So, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Jill. Right, you've got a number of questions coming through. The first one from Laura is about surveys. What is the difference between me doing my survey myself and asking somebody else to do it for me?
I think there's, first of all, there's the time and effort required to do on yourself. It's not to say you shouldn't, but you will make mistakes, and you might not plan the questions in the best way to get the results you really need. So that's one thing. But the second thing is having somebody independent also gives you a different point of view. So when I do a survey for someone or a telephone interview, quite often that customer will tell something to me they wouldn't say to you face to face as a business owner. So that's a good reason sometimes to consider, if you've got the budget, outsourcing it, because you will get a slightly different point of view and you'll get a more professional questionnaire that will give you the results you actually want. If you're doing something like a staff survey, usually a business will want an independent point of view. They won't run it in-house for that reason.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question come through about the reward schemes. I'm interested in using your reward scheme idea. If I do this, how do I get it right and it doesn't look like a bribe?
Again, this is a little bit of trial and error. You might not get it right first time. But think about the value of what you're asking somebody to recommend. Obviously, if somebody recommends you and you're getting a huge contract out of it, then it'd be really nice to take them out for a meal and wine and dine them and make them feel really special because you've got a lot of business from that referrer, and that's great. But if you did that to everybody that referred you for a smaller service or something that's lesser value, it's going to look like a bribe. So it's thinking about the proportion. You know, you might want to send a voucher, you might want to send some money, some flowers. Sometimes just a thank you card in the post is the most effective way of rewarding somebody. It's just saying, yes, we noticed, thank you very much for that business, and it will encourage them to do it again. So it is important that you thank them, but just have a little think about what is the value of what they're recommending, and is it a proportional value that I'm thanking it. So thank you, not a bribe.
Thank you. Kevin asks, can you give your views on using the 5-point scale versus 10 for the referral index calculation?
Oh, can I? Traditionally we just use 5 because people find it easier to fill in a box of 5, and if you give them 10, it just looks a bit more complicated. And if you want people to fill in surveys, you try and make them as simple as you can. So it's not to say that 10 is wrong. You could do 10 if you want to, but if people are faced with a 10-point scale, they might just think it's a bit more intimidating. So try and make your surveys as user-friendly as you can, and a 5-point scale usually looks a bit more doable, if that helps.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Jill, for hosting this week's webinar.
Thank you for inviting me.
I will be sending out a copy of the presentation and also Jill's contact details out to you all very shortly. So thank you all again for joining us, and we hope you can make our Lunch and Learn webinars a regular slot in your calendar. They're currently every Tuesday at 12:30. Jill and I hope you have a great afternoon.